Hello, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the Bardstream. This should be an interesting conversation this evening. I've got a special guest with me, Adam Wood, who you all are certainly familiar with from my live stream campaigns. He has been a supporter in many different ways, a supporter and a friend for many years, and I was glad to see that he was selected in the patron selection for this month. I do a selection of 2 patrons from my Patreon every month, and whoever gets selected can choose essentially whatever benefit that they want from a list of benefits. So he opted to appear as a guest on the Bardstream to brainstorm and conceptualize with me ideas for the coming and the hopefully not too distant future mega campaign, where the idea is that I'm going to put together this big campaign for, subscribers and viewers and patrons and just kind of everybody from my community, let's call it, with tons of people playing and lots of people GMing, all taking part in this same world, sort of a West Marches style format. But there's a lot of parts to put in place, and so I want to get things right, and I want to do this in a good way. So I'm taking the time to think through some different things, and I have a lot of questions that I need to sort out. So he's going to come on here, and we're going to talk about some of these topics, some of these concepts, and the principles. I have this idea that there needs to be set in place from the beginning some like principles, or like guiding, more than just guidelines, like guiding tenets. By the way, we're also listening to his music. I don't know if you know this, but he creates music, like dungeon synth type music. So what you're hearing in the background is an album that he put out a couple months ago, inspired by that last big live stream campaign that we played, Mirrormorn. In particular, one of the regions, the like coastal region near Barnacle, that got featured a lot in the, I'd say maybe the first 1/3 of that campaign, but still, that throughout most of the campaign, they were not far from that area. So there's a link down in the video description where you can go check out his Bandcamp and check out the album. The album is called Cavernous Coast, and the artist name that he goes by is Quariok, which is one of the goblin, like coastal goblin coastal shrines that the party delved into in some early sessions of that campaign. All right, so let's jump into that. Let me bring Adam on here. Hi, Adam.
Hey,
Thanks for coming on, man.
no problem.
And I'm excited about this topic. It's something that has been ongoing for a while, as you well know.
Yeah, and it's something I want to see happen. It's a cool idea.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. It's just the thought of so many people engaging from my community and all playing in this setting that, I could say it's my setting, but this is a shared game. So, I could see other people contributing to it, and I could read like each GM's world building concepts or session notes or player reports from the adventures and draw from that when I do like official published in a book world building stuff. So yeah, I was really happy when you opted to go for the live stream, and you've been a sounding board and feedback giver and playtester, and even like, what would I say, assistant writer in some, like with the Emporium. You did some writing for some bits of the lore on a few.
That was
of
a
the
lot of fun,
monsters.
actually. Those
Cool.
were some good prompts. that my work is only as good as the strength of the prompt.
Well, I try to give interesting prompts and art directing and stuff. So anyone out there who has the Emporium and who actually reads through the lore, and that lore really is worth reading through on the monsters and everything, you probably have read through some things that Adam here wrote, like the original draft of it. And I usually didn't have to do much editing on your stuff. Your writing is pretty solid and pretty creative. Okay, so let's talk about this mega campaign. I'm calling it mega campaign. It might be considered a West Marches campaign or semi West Marches. It's
Right.
definitely, if nothing else, inspired by the West Marches format. So
Sure.
I'm gonna run with mega campaign for now.
Yeah, I mean the label. There's a whole bunch of different terms that are all kind of roughly equivalent with that.
So I'm giving this a lot of thought. I want to, since this is so much effort to put it together in many different ways, both like the logistical side of organizing lots of GMs and players and just, getting that piece of it, the scheduling and everything, and getting everyone on the same page. There's also the whole world building side. And it's probably going to lead to a Kickstarter campaign for like a campaign setting plus adventure path, like campaign plus setting book. So
Right.
there's a lot going into this. So I want to, kind of do my due diligence and do what I think is my best effort to give it the best shot possible to be successful, to not just crash and burn right out of the gates.
Sure. And
So-
I mean, the longer it doesn't crash and burn, the more it gets to actually happen, and that's always fun.
So there's this idea, and I think it's a true idea. I think it's truth regarding role-playing games, in which a GM can write all the world building and NPCs that he wants, and you could write pages of it, but no one even knows it exists. Like, it's not real, and to an extent the players don't even really care about it until they are actually engaging with it in some meaningful way.
Right.
Like, your characters in Mirrormorn are exploring these like layers of ruins beneath what we termed the Arcane Sanctum, and there was the area that had like some kind of fire elemental catastrophe and lava and such, but there were other areas underneath that and connected areas. And I had written some history, like what's behind that and why is that there, and what were the purpose of those things, and how did it come to be in the state that it's in now, and what are these critters that are scuttling around there in the ruins. But that's not really real, or doesn't even really matter to you until your characters are actually exploring it and like investigating these ruins, encountering the dangers, hopefully plundering some kind of treasure or gaining experience from it. So that's something that appeals to me so much about this idea of the mega campaign, because it's going to be more than just me homebrewing a world. It's going to be
Right.
people actually engaging with this world and adventuring through it. And,
Well, and with any type of large format thing, or even just like a player-driven game in your own home group of a reasonable size, it's when something is player-driven like that, you get a lot less of that stuff I've just built that the players might get into, because the focus often is on like, okay, the players are deliberately engaging with this, so I'm going to develop this more, or some wacky thing happened and now I need to come up with some emergent thing that follows that. So you end up with like more of a synergy, I guess.
so there's many levels in which it's good, and I see it as a win-win for both, myself, or let's just say my brand, and everybody else, the players and supporters, and from a business sense, customers. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I'm trying to create products that are more than just products, but they are products from a business perspective. And if I'm going to continue creating these things and living this life, I have to have customers to buy the products. That's how a business works. You create something of value that some people need or they enjoy or enhances something, and then they support that when they make their purchase. So it's like, I want to make something that people can not just look at it, but actually experience it.
Right.
And something of quality, and something that like my community's engaged in. And I don't know if I'm quite articulating this. The idea is that this mega campaign is just a free thing. People are just doing it because we love it. GMs aren't paid, players aren't paying. Everyone is just involved just out of the love of it. And from that, I will draw ideas and inspiration and kind of playtest, even, playtest mechanically speaking, ideas for the book that will get a Kickstarter. So
right.
Ideally, there's this positive loop there. It's like me and the Esper the Bard channel brand business, us, the people engaged in this mythic / social / game experience.
Yeah, I get that. It's less like you're buying a product and more like you're actually, enjoying playing a game, because ideally that's exactly what you're doing.
Well, I want the mega campaign to be good for my business. I want it to help my business. Right. And the cycle back part of that is I also want it to be like a giving and investing. I think giving is the right word. A giving to my community.
Yeah, because it feels less like, hey, buy my stuff, and more like, hey, let's play a game. And you're the creator of that, so people know you as that. And then, also the guy what makes various videos on various topics.
So I think this is a good segue then. So since this involves a lot of effort and investment on everybody's part, I have this idea that's been developing in my mind for a while now, that the RPG is not just a game in the simple sense of the word game. It's not merely fun. I think that there's this potential that we're kind of, when I say we, I mean like the broader, sphere of role-playing games.
Right.
Role-playing gamers some are kind of plugged into that fact that it is more serious, that there's something deeper going on, and then some really aren't, and they just take it as mere fun, right? Just having having a lighthearted, goofing around with your friends, chuckling and stuff.
Right.
But I can't see it that way, since it requires so much personal investment. It's like, why are we doing this? Why aren't we doing something else that doesn't take so much time and energy and brain power and learning all these rules and like multiple skill sets to get very good at it, if it's only fun? Like you've played in 2 long form campaigns of mine now.
Yep.
Don't you have the sense that at many moments throughout those campaigns, there was something that we were engaged in that is beyond just simple surface level fun?
It's one of those, I mean, it was fun, but also, it's an experience that, because of the inherent unpredictability of you and multiple other people collaboratively doing something, it does take on a form that's like not exactly what you imagined it to be, but more than what you imagined it to be. and it ends up being, you know, a more immersive thing. It's a different kind of. It's different than a. I mean, not that video games can't be immersive, but it is different than something where all of the outcomes and the interactions are more or less pre-programmed, or else procedurally generated by like one
Right.
specific algorithm.
Compared to a video game, it's immersive on a personal level.
Yeah.
Whereas the video game is more of this objective thing. It doesn't matter if it's you or, you know, Joe Blow playing the game, that's going to be that same thing that got
Right.
programmed into the game that's going to happen. So, like, you know, you're really into music, and I am too. Why do people make music? Like, you could say, oh, I like music. Or, you know, it's fun to play music, or it's fun to play in a band. And that, I think that is true. There's an energy that you put out there by performing the music, and that can perk people up, or, you know, get people in a livelier state. But there's more to it than just that. Like, why do we like music? Why do we like the arts? I mean, there's something deeper about that has to do with, like, you know, the human condition and exploring like our stories of what it means to be us, and to grapple with all of the strange and sometimes really wondrous things that come about through this life.
Yeah.
My son is 3.5. For the longest time, he was just watching like baby cartoons and baby music. You know, stuff for kids to like learn their colors and things like that.
Sure.
You know, that's fun, but there's also another layer underneath that. There's an education and early childhood development level to it.
Right.
Over these past few months, he has really gotten into, he's 3.5, really gotten into like serious music, like music for adults, like classic rock and 90s rock, and even some of the like better quality pop music stuff from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And he really likes it. Like he'll put it on like on his own. He'll go and turn it on. And my wife and I, you know, we chuckle at that, and it's kind of cute and amusing. But I see something, like even a child, he's able to tap into something, connect with something.
Yep.
Something that is
art,
something that is
fundamental.
not easily expressed in words, but music, stories, these immersive role-playing game experiences, like the great movies, they can capture something that communicates on this other level that we may not, in like our conscious mind, be able to so well put our finger on it.
Yeah. I mean, you know, there are fundamental things that I don't have a degree in any social science and can't necessarily professionally comment on, but you know, which are part of who we are as humans, and it's kind of hard to explain exactly what it is that makes us do those things, but it's its own reward. It just, you know, especially when you make something that's like your thing, it feels good in a way that just consuming something doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of the whole, you know, tying it back to the whole mega campaign thing. It's like, if I bought your book, that's one thing, that's fun, it's useful, something I can use in my own games. But if I'm playing a game that you're the overall head GM of, I am more directly engaging with your content than if I just use your book. Even if I'm using your book in that mega campaign, which I imagine is probably going to be the case quite a bit.
So there's two ideas there, and I want to tie them together. The one idea is that I'm the chief of this enterprise, and then the other idea is what I was just talking about. Like there are these deeper qualities that make things like immersive role-playing games, music, film, art satisfying on a deeper level than just mere entertainment or just mere fun. So there are these two ideas. I want to link these together. So since I want this project to have a higher chance for success and sustainability, I'm trying to figure out like what can I do to give it that higher shot, that better shot. Well, I think what I need to do is I need to come up with something like a set of rules. It's kind of like rules plus like a sacred text plus like a constitution, like a we the people. Here's the Bill of Rights. Here's the 10 Commandments. Here's the like the immutable values that are part of this setting. And one of those, I think, is we are treating this as a serious thing. Now, I want to be very clear. That does not mean that we're having no fun. Just that it's not merely fun, or that it's only surface level fun. I think there's deep enjoyment, and like I said, you've played in these long campaigns. There are moments where we laugh a lot. There are moments where it's very solemn. There's like the whole dramatic range, right? We're like in this theater of of heroes and myth and stuff, and
it makes a lot of sense
spectrum.
for a large scale game like that. It really wouldn't behoove you to have it be just a purely comedic style or a not serious game, because those kinds of games can be fun, but to actually get a whole group of people together, if you were just having like a fuck around night type of game, it would fall apart pretty quick.
And to be explicit about that, in this, the title I'm giving this document is the Canon of Ikoros. Ikoros being the name of the world for everyone who's saying, what is that weird word? So, to be explicit, make that one of the tenets, right? One of the principles. This setting, this is a serious setting. It's for people that want to have a serious. It's for people that want to take this seriously. And it's kind of walking a fine line, because I don't want it to tread too far where it's like, this is the only way anyone should ever play a game. That's not what it's intending to say. But what it's intending to say is, you have many different options out there for games and entertainment and whatnot. By choosing this option to play the Ikoros setting, that is when you want to take this seriously. And I don't. You mentioned games that have like a comedy style to it. So yes, those definitely exist. I think a lot of games, they just don't really talk about this at all. They don't ever really address it. They just kind of, for better or for worse, just here's the thing, do whatever you want. Like D&D is that way. D&D is, here are the books, you're going to come across everything. Like you're going to flip the page, and on one page you'll come across something where it's like, this is so goofy. Like it's 3 kobolds in a trench coat and like a baby mind flayer, and you have to steal the cheese or something. And then you flip to the next page and it's like, mummies inspired by these like ancient religious traditions and these rites, and they can curse you with this awful curse, and you're gonna like rot away to just desert sand that blows away at the slightest breeze. And it's just, the game says, here you go, have fun, just figure it out. Which, that's not necessarily a wrong way to do it. It's not what I want to do. And I would suspect people that want to participate in this setting, they're either they want an alternative to that, something that is more defined in tone, style, approach, that's more serious or mature, or as best I can gauge, there's a lot of people that I think are sick of that. They're just they're sick of the hodgepodge back and forth, just kind of the shenanigans of it all, the kind of disjointedness, the disunity.
Well, even just at a minimum, if they're wanting to play in your game, they're wanting to play in this large scale, ongoing, persistent world type thing, and they want that to work. And for it to work, there generally does have to be some kind of consistency. There have to be certain concessions, or at least certain player buy-ins, which a number of people I've seen do that. Like, I know Matt Colville has, I think, made a video or two about that, and there are some systems, actually, especially of the old school Renaissance, or the, hey, we took some classic ideas and applied modern twists to them flair, where they actually go into, like, yeah, these are your concessions here. You're agreeing to having certain restrictions on your creativity in order to give it a framework, rather than just saying, oh, you can be as creative as you want to be, have at it with no guidance, where, yeah, I guess you could come up with anything, but also you're going to end up with everybody at the table making
for
stuff
the sake of
that
this not
necessarily
devolving
mesh.
into Calvin Ball.
Right.
Here are the limits. They are limits. They are restrictions, but they also give definition. They give clarity. They give a style. They give a personality.
Right.
It's like, how well do you want this clay molded? On one end of the spectrum, it's just a lump of formless clay, and it's like, just do whatever you want with it. And then on the other end is like, this clay can only be shaped in this specific form, and you're restricted from doing anything else. But at the end, you get this, whatever, you get a replica of Notre Dame, and it looks like Notre Dame because Notre Dame has to look like that thing.
Right. And when you have a game that's big enough, there are, I don't know, at least probably dozens, if not maybe hundreds of players eventually. You do need something like that just to keep some amount of consistency, and you need more than just like the general, like, no bullying, don't be racist type rules. You need some kind of a something that says, hey, this is the tone we're going for. You're all, anything is welcome, anyone is welcome, but you need to agree to a few things. You need to make sure your characters are vaguely in line with this stuff. You can't be doing stuff that's disruptive. You have to agree to certain meta rules, maybe, or certain conventions that will help further the aim of everybody.
So the other point about that I'm trying to connect together is with, Esper, or the Esper the Bard brand being the chief or the president of this this campaign, which is true, but I want these tenets, this canon of Ichorus, I want that to be above me. I want it to be above everybody, kind of like how the Constitution of the United States is above everyone. Like, even the president is subordinate to the Constitution. Now, we could, people can have arguments and debates about how those rules can get bent, and loopholes and breakdowns.
Right.
And okay, yes, people are flawed. There's always going to be some tendency to corruption that humans have. True. But at the end of the day, the ultimate point is, it's not the king does whatever the king wants whenever the king has any whim at any time, and no one can defy him.
Right.
The president is beholden to the law of the land. That's what I'm trying to say. So let's say I'm the president. I am also beholden to the law of the land, which is why I wanted to talk to you and other people. I think there's going to be kind of ongoing communications, because I want to just not draft this alone. Maybe I'm the principal writer and editor, but I want it to be, I want contributions and feedback from other people as well. because, you know, maybe I have an idea that I think is good, but is actually half crazy or wonky in some kind of way.
Sure.
But, you know, like if it's just King Esper, then, you know, what if my whims change 10 years down the line? Or what if,
Right.
you know, the day comes and I pass away and this gets handed down to somebody else, and they're like, well, actually, I have a different idea, and I'm going to steer the ship 180 degrees, and, you know, now Ikoros is a multiverse, and everything everyone knew up until now, that was just one of the universes, but there are infinite ones, and everything's totally different in every other universe, and just wrecks the whole thing into the ground. I want there to be this eternal document that everyone can always refer back to that's like, no, if you're breaking these things, it's not this game anymore. It's no longer this game if you
Right.
betray or undermine the principles of this game.
And at the same time, it's almost a little bit like, you know, you saying that you yourself are beholden to that is kind of a bit like saying to your players, like, yeah, you know, I as the GM am controlling the monsters and creating the world, but I'm creating it for your characters to adventure in. I'm not making you the side characters in my pre-written plot line that I think is such a great story that needs to be told. And I'm not just having the monsters out here to try and kill your characters. It's not a competitive game. You know, I'm doing all this stuff specifically to challenge you so that interesting story outcomes will result, and ultimately you'll be able to do cool stuff.
Yeah. And hopefully this document will not only serve as the guiding beacon to help us steer clear of mucky pitfalls and that, you know, human tendency to get greedy and prideful and corrupt, but it will also serve as a way for me to connect with the GMs and do mentoring, and we can refer back to this as necessary. And I don't know what that will even look like, if it's something that will come up just rarely every once in a while or what. I don't know. I don't know how like philosophical people are willing to get. I really don't know. Maybe some people will, and some people, they won't care about that at all. They'll just kind of read it and say, you know, whatever, sounds cool. I just want to, you know, make my fight the goblins and get the gold adventure.
Yeah, if nothing
I
else,
want to
though,
find out.
it's
I'm
just,
really curious.
yeah.
It's exciting to me to see, because I see this potential for the RPG experience to reach a depth that hasn't quite been reached yet, and at the same time a height, like a height of quality, a pinnacle and a depth that have not been yet reached.
Sure.
And I really think that's true. I mean, just think about it in simple terms. Would you say that the greatest height of what a role-playing game could be has already been reached? Has that already been accomplished?
I mean, there are arguments to be made, but probably not.
I wouldn't say so.
I would say
there have been some amazing achievements, but I wouldn't say, nope, the pinnacle of what it could be, that's already been done. It's all downhill from here.
Well, see, actually, I would say that's true.
Oh, you cut out there.
Yep. I would say that the pinnacle of the RPG experience is exactly what happened in, you know, Tommy Scarpone's basement on October 23rd, 1987, when all of you guys together broke the giant ruby in the castle of Palace of the Silver Princess and freed all the trapped in time people. And because you did it in your own group's unique way, and everybody remembers that decades later, that was the pinnacle of the RPG experience. And it's, you know, something where like the real heights are
I would say high
personal.
watermark. I would call that a high watermark, but not the fullest extent of the potential of the RPG.
That's fair. Although I guess there are always, pretty much always new things you can get out of it because of the nature of the hobby. I don't know if you'll ever reach like a pinnacle of exactly what you can accomplish with
Mhm.
it as
Yeah,
a
but
format
that's okay
for
because
games.
it's the aiming that's important. It's
Sure.
the fact that you're aiming for the stars, even though you may not reach the stars. You're still aiming up, and you're gonna get like as far as you can get. Like to make as great of quality of of
Right.
artistic endeavor that you can that you can accomplish. So, um, yeah, I'm gonna keep working on this as I can. I've made a couple notes already about some of these tenets.
Right.
I don't know if you have done anything like that. Have you written anything like? What would you like to see as one of the, one of the tenets, the one of the commandments, one of the rights?
I hadn't done a whole lot of thinking about that. I think so far, mostly when you've been talking about this, I've been thinking about like, what kinds of things would make the game work better, what kinds of meta rules would be, a positive addition to the experience. How could you do something that you couldn't get in another game? So I guess if I were thinking about a tenet, it would be something like, because this is a shared world, you can build things that you wouldn't in a standard campaign, or because this is the format that it is, there are certain things you get to do that you wouldn't otherwise. Like you could have, say one GM has like a town, you could have multiple parties in that town by virtue of their adventuring help build it up, and thus you'd have that sort of almost economy aspect, or like, you could even, I don't know if rivalry is something that should be really encouraged, but you could have like friendly rivalries develop between certain parties, and there's the whole aspect of an ecosystem and a sort of functioning organism to it that's not present in just one single group.
Interplay between different groups,
Yeah, or between groups and the
groups of
world.
characters, really is what I mean. Because
Yeah, yeah,
players, it's a little bit more fluid of a campaign format where a player could end up
right,
in principle, any GM's game, or
right.
multiple GM's games across spans of time.
And much like in the original blog post, West Marches, and also in games of yore, I anticipate, each player playing probably a small stable of characters rather than just like one for only
Hmm.
anything ever.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that all of the participants should have a, like a couple first level characters on standby, right?
Right,
Ready to play at a moment's notice. And there's a couple of good reasons for that. One is your character might die and you need to bring in a new character. Okay. Another is, let's say a player cancels last minute.
right,
The GM could make a post on it'll be like some kind of Discord channel saying like, hey, I need a last minute player. Is anyone available? So you would need a character ready to go right away
right.
in that case of someone doing a last minute fill in. And like what it looks like to me is that when a character gets used in a session, that character is now present in the world, in that zone, in that location.
Right.
And that character is not going to leave that zone until it's somehow communicated with the GM or GMs. It's not like, oh, I played, Valziran last week in Adam's campaign, and now I want to play in Bob's campaign, so I'm just going to use Valziran and all the stuff he gained in Adam's game
Right.
and not tell the
Right.
DMs anything. It'd be more like, no, Valziran's over there. So Bob's, he's a GM of a completely different region of the world and has a totally different base. So
Right.
I'm going to bring in, this other character that I have in my stable, I think is what you said,
Yeah.
right? My roster, bring him into
Yeah.
Bob's campaign, and it's like that spirit, right? Like comes down into the world, like manifests
Right.
officially out of
And I
just
think
the concept cloud.
the hope might be that sessions are self-contained enough that players would end up with their characters at the end of a session either back in town or otherwise safe, so that they could go off and do something else. But
Yeah.
especially if there is, and I anticipate there would certainly be at some point, multi-session things where your character's in the middle of a dungeon. They're not going to suddenly be over halfway across the world getting into
Yeah.
a different one.
Sure. The way that's looking at the moment, the way that it's shaping up is a GM, every GM will do this. A GM will make a post of when he's available to play a session and how many sessions it will be. It could be a 1-shot, it could be a 2-shot, could be a 3-shot. It might be pushing our luck if we want to go beyond 3. We're not really going to know until we play this out and get live results. But for the sake of simplicity, let's say the GM makes a post and says, Monday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 1-shot or 2-shot or 3-shot. Each session is 1 hour. No, that's too short. 2 hour, 3 hour, or 4 hour. Okay, so let's just say, for example, I post Monday, 7 p.m., 2-shot. So 2 back-to-back Mondays at 7 p.m., each 3-hour sessions. So we can end session 1 in the middle of the dungeon. If it's a dungeon, we'll say it's a dungeon. We end session 1 in the middle of the dungeon, and we will know that by the end of session 2, you either need to, complete your delve and go back to the base, or if a session time ends, like time's up, and there's no more sessions left in this string of sessions, the players retreat. There's some. I mean, the DM can make up a story reason that's very simple, such as an additional horde of monsters comes, clambering up the stairs. You make a tactical retreat, otherwise face certain doom.
Right. Or the
here's
dungeon.
Here's the amount of experience points you gained for. Maybe let's say it's half. You get half the amount of experience points since you got through, a good portion of the encounter but didn't complete it.
Or like if the dungeon is a treasure ship that's full of cool loot and is slowly sinking, and after 2 sessions worth of stuff, just that's the arbitrary amount that abstracts the time it takes.
Yeah.
The ship will sink.
Though I do think it could be a case where, let's say I did a 3-session adventure. We did 3 consecutive Mondays, 3 hours, and we're still in this dungeon. But then everyone just says on the call, we can all play at the same time next Monday. So, I mean, yeah, you just negotiate it out. It should just be organically negotiated to some extent. I don't want it to break down into, okay, well, this is just my only group now, and I only DM for you 4 guys every Monday at 7 p.m.
Right.
The idea is that it's, rotating DMs and players and different people doing different things.
And there need to be some baked in story reasons and even mechanical rules, maybe, just to kind of slightly politely enforce the idea of, these are not 5th edition published adventure path style campaigns. They're not going to last that long. Because it is a shared world, your character should be able to go exploring different parts of it, and the pickup nature of it means you need to be not just like stuck in one thing forever.
Yeah. Not be stuck in one thing forever, but also with enough variability, enough freedom of the scheduling that it's not only 1-shots.
Right. Which I think
I'm pretty adamant about
yeah.
that. I'm pretty because some West Marches campaigns, they're only one shots. Every session is a one shot.
Right.
You're always back at the base at the end of every single session.
Well, so that's the other thing is actually you can totally have something that is not a one shot, but where you do end up back somewhere safe at the end of the session. It's entirely possible, and a lot of games I played are like that, where in fact mega dungeons overwhelmingly tend to be at least a little bit like that. Like sometimes if they're big enough, there are safe rooms in the dungeon. But I played more than I played West March's games themselves. I've played, here's a big mega dungeon. You're going to go in and delve around and then come back. And then when you leave the dungeon, that's when you do things like experience points for all the loot you've hauled out and stuff like that. I think that's a very, very effective way of. I mean, it's a style of play I enjoy, but also it's an effective way of running something like this, where it does leave characters available to either re-up and agree to, yeah, okay, let's do session 2 of this. We haven't figured out everything. I failed that check, but damn it, I think there's a secret door there. Where else did that breeze come from? I want to go back. Or say, okay, yeah, actually, I'm not going to be available this time next week. I'll go do another one. Or, yeah, I mean, I wanted to do this one, but also I think Bob is running something that, like, my character actually specifically, it's connected to his whole thing. Or then it also leaves the room open for, hey, yeah, my character was in a different session last time, but actually her family's heirloom is it's in that dungeon, isn't it? Otherwise, why would it be called the Tomb of the Dwarf Lords? My character's descended from the original Dwarf Lords, like the Lords of all Dwarves. Uh, so yeah, I think that kind of flexibility is achievable.
I do too, and there's something beautiful with the ability for the players and the GMs to work this out, and it largely, as I said in our private channel, the scheduling goblin be largely in the players' hands.
Right.
Like, you all figure out who can play at the time that the GM posted. Once you've got your party assembled, then you reply to the GM.
Yeah, and
that could be a brand new party coming together and playing with that GM for the first time ever, or it could be the situation you described where, oh yeah, like, 2 months ago we did a delve into that mega dungeon, and our party is, camped out outside, or, resting in a sanctuary fortified area within the dungeon. Let's resume that for another session.
Right. And that I think that's the kind of core tenet I would want to see in there, is that whole flexibility is part of what helps it feel alive. It makes it feel like the world is living and breathing, rather than things existing in video game stasis until you interact with them. Because you have other people all around doing that stuff, and you can kind of choose, much like a person can choose. Hey, I'm feeling very unfulfilled in this career. I can try another one now, or that's I guess a bit of a loose connection, but it makes it feel a bit more like a world and less like exactly just an on paper thing.
I'm really glad that you mentioned all that, because that has opened my mind to some more possibilities, specifically with the mega dungeon and like pausing between delves, or it doesn't even have to be between delves. It could be, but it also could just be between like moments of a delve,
right?
Between rests, maybe, or something.
Yeah.
Because in my mind, I was like, okay, what if a GM posts, I can do a 2-hour one shot. That's all that I'm available for like a month. In the whole month, I can only do 1 2-hour one shot. And I think, like, well, you can't do much with that. Like, all you can really do with that is, like, the party scouts out a short ways from the base, has one quick encounter, and then comes back. But the way that you've put it is like, oh no, it could be, maybe the 2 hour could be like the encounter getting to the dungeon. Or maybe
Right.
there's no encounter there. It could just be like the first room of the dungeon.
Yeah.
Pause. And maybe you do have to wait a month before you can play with that GM again. But it's good knowing that there it could be just the
Yeah.
let's go scout the woods 2 miles away and like have this one medium scale encounter. Or it could be, yeah, like the first couple rooms and one of them has an encounter in it.
Yeah, and not to drag things back to mega dungeons because that's not the only thing that can do this. But
Right.
a lot of the classic large scale dungeons, the classic and modern, like some of the really well, most dungeons early on, especially the ones that are big, but that definitely bigger new things like Stone Hell or Rapana Thuk, uh, classic stuff like Caves of Chaos or Caverns of Thracia, R.I.P. General Jacquet, that they're all kind of designed with that in mind, where there are ways to get out. There are different parts to them that you can go into separately from each other and in any particular way. Like, there's no single linear path. They're often loops, and you can come in from different ways. And then they are geared towards the idea of each time you leaving the nearby keep on the borderlands or whatever the safe town or fortress is, going in, coming back, and when you come back out, that's you've got an XP from hauling loot out to a safe place, and that's kind of your main goal. Or then also, almost all of them have places where there are kind of already set up for you, or at least there are the tools to create safe rooms or other safe spaces inside a dungeon where, by the rules, you aren't necessarily tallying up experience points right then and there, but, you can stop, kind of pause in the dungeon, and that way you could, in a modern sense, or like in what we're talking about, play it as like a one shot or a 2 or a 3 shot or something, depending on how exactly you go about it.
You've mentioned a couple times already this stream in conversation with me multiple times the loot as XP concept.
Yes.
That seems to be something that really appeals to you.
It
I
does.
I haven't seen the appeal yet, and I'm still trying to figure out why it's appealing. Why is that appealing to you?
It's because it is a mechanical reinforcement and a mechanical incentive to emphasize the exploration pillar, like the role playing, combat, and exploration as the 3 pillars of RPGs. It really emphasizes the exploration pillar in a mechanical sense that actually makes you want to do it because of the way it's supported by the mechanics. It's not just suggested. Because if you gain experience points more from, and it doesn't have to be loot. Loot is just an easily quantifiable one because gold pieces have a value. It's a number. But it gives you something where your primary goal is actually recovering loot from the dungeon instead of slaying monsters. Like, you get some XP from monsters, but it's the secondary thing. So you are just going into a dungeon thinking about, this fight could be really deadly if we fight this owlbear here. It's a big beefy creature. Our characters are low level. It could end up killing multiple of us, and then either you have to roll a new character, or if you really like that character, want to bring them back, you have to hunt down some high level cleric to resurrect them or something. That's costly. Whereas if we avoid the fight, if we take a longer way around or trick the owlbear with some creative technique to get it running off after some decoy, then we can go in and cart the treasure chest out while it's distracted, and then now you've actually you have a reason to avoid a fight. You have a reason.
So I see the
supported by
value
rules to not
in
kick down the door.
XP being detached from having to kill a monster. I do see the value in that for like the reason that you just explained.
And for loot as XP, that kind of is the main thrust of it. It's not that it has to just be for treasure. It's just that gaining XP based on treasure is an easily quantifiable thing where you have a number that says, okay, we collectively as a group successfully brought 5,000 gold pieces worth of gold and gems and assorted stuff out of the
Hmm.
dungeon. We've
What if
successfully
it's a
done
dungeon
that.
that doesn't have treasure,
Well,
or monsters that don't have treasure?
right. That and then it's a little more on the GM to say, okay, you've completed this dungeon, that
Hmm.
should be worth something, or
Yeah.
you
So
gain.
what I was thinking when I mentioned, unhooking XP from killing stuff is more like XP is given for successfully completing objectives.
Right,
And to complete the objective, you very well might have to fight something. You probably will have to fight something. That's one of the main combats, one of the main things of RPGs.
right,
But you're not required to always fight everything. And
right.
let me give you an example. There are some issues that can come along with random encounters.
Hmm.
One of the issues that can come along with random encounters is it can kind of screw with XP. Maybe the GM wasn't expecting that your characters were going to get more XP, and that like your characters are going to like reach a level up before you even get to the end of the adventure, and you weren't supposed to level up until the end of the adventure, and now you're
Right.
going up against the final boss of the adventure with like higher level abilities and spells than, and then the boss is not quite so scary and
Sure.
powerful anymore. Or like, well, your characters are pretty high on resources. You're not really missing much in terms of hit points and spells and things. And okay, random encounter. There is danger in this area that you're crossing through. You're just gonna kick this thing's ass. I didn't roll anything particularly challenging on the random encounter table. You're high on resources. You're not even getting to the dungeon today. So, like, are we just gonna go through the motions of your party just hacking this brown bear to bits? And I'm like, okay, here's
Right.
your 200 XP you got for that thing that it ultimately had no impact. I might as well have just said a, you know, a territorial brown bear appears. Do you all, circumvent it, distract it, animal? What would I say? Like, you apply some sort of animal skills, or do you kill it?
Right.
Just do you all just describe what happens? This is not worth XP or anything. It's just our shared storytelling moment.
Right. Which
Um,
I mean, that's kind of something a GM can just handle. But yeah,
the old
and
school,
there's
let's say the old school way, loot is XP, loot as XP, or
right,
completing objectives as XP. Plus, there isn't anything as like short resting, rolling your hit dice, and long resting, all your hit points replenish and all your hit dice come back. So that bear fight, even
right,
though ultimately it's not much of a challenge, it still did bite someone and knock out
right,
some hit points,
right.
and that meant something
Yeah,
because
and
those hit points
it's
don't come back
that
very easily.
another thing that often
Has
goes
like
with that is
long term
yeah,
consequences.
right. Which one other thing that's often paired with that is a higher lethality or a slower character progression once you reach a certain level, or something that makes it so that no matter what stage of the game you're at, any given fight has the potential, even if it's not too likely, has some potential to not go your way. And it does kind of also go with the slight concession of throwing a little bit of balance out the window. Like, okay, yeah, sure, some fights are gonna be cakewalks, uh,
Hmm.
just by what makes sense in terms of where you are in the setting and
Yeah,
what exactly you're
and
doing.
the idea
You
of this
will end up
format
with
of
some easy
campaign is
fights,
that the players could choose to do an easier adventure, or to bring
right?
higher level characters on an adventure that's
Right.
lower level comparatively, or
And
vice
also just
versa, to
the
be very ambitious and
right,
deliberately take on a more dangerous adventure with like with characters that are not at the quote unquote appropriate level.
right. Which honestly, that is something that I think that really has come around in popularity more in the OSR now, like in terms of people who I guess it's sometimes happened in actual older versions, but in modern games that seek to improve on old method, or not improve on, but like uh, use older rules as a base and then apply other more current or just
Mm-hmm.
different
Modern
concepts.
innovations.
Yeah, because that is an area where like the idea of balance is seen as like appropriate level encounters is seen as less appropriate as thematically or story sense making encounters
Yeah.
or even as like the slightly video gamey but in a fun way idea of different areas of the world being different levels
Mm-hmm.
or inherently more dangerous. So
Yeah.
you have some communication of knowing exactly what the risks are
Sure.
when you go somewhere.
I'm a fan of that, and I don't think that's
Yeah.
particularly a modern video gamey thing.
Or
Like everyone
also
knows,
the yeah,
the fields just beyond Hobbiton are less dangerous than Mordor.
right. Oh, old man Willow
It's
though. But yeah,
a
there's
lower level zone compared to
sure.
Mordor.
And honestly, that is something I really like in RPGs too. It's nice, even if it's as simple as just like a higher random encounter die or something like that. It is nice to enforce that with some level of little rule that doesn't add a whole lot of complexity.
Mm-hmm.
Which actually, that is another thing in West Marches games, and like in the original blog post West Marches, is that one pretty central theme, which is also common in older games, and also actually in some modern games too, like the canonical points of light setting for fourth edition,
Mm-hmm.
where
That's a good
you
setting.
have a safe space. You have a contrast between somewhere safe and somewhere dangerous, and
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes there is a dungeon relatively close to your safe area,
Yeah.
whether it's a town or a fortress or an island or whatever. Uh, and also that, and also just unexplored areas. So like you might have a town and you have a map, like in the original blog, it's a map carved into a table in the tavern where it has like 5 locations marked and then some extra icons that might not even have any names.
Mm-hmm.
And just in gathering rumors around town, you might learn, oh yeah, okay, the lone tree is the only tree in this desert for miles around. It said that some legendary hero died there with blood. I hit the wrong button. Uh, or like stuff like that. But then also at the same time, you just see, whoa, that dungeon looks like a face, and by
Always a
having
sure sign
that
that there's something interesting or potentially lethal
right,
there.
and that is to me one of the things that really sells and really propels a game like this, where you have that map and that safe space and wilderness or dangerous areas thing, because it creates reasons for you to want to gather a party and go adventuring. Like in the more modern West Marches format, one of the things that really it is a core tenet of it is the idea of we made a party for this week for this session time to go do this.
Mm-hmm.
So the players, it's a good for player investment where it's not just like okay, I want to play some D&D on Tuesday. GM, come up with something for us.
Yeah.
What do you want to?
Yeah, I do
I want it
like
to be like
it being a little
Ravenloft,
bit
but not too much like
more.
Ravenloft.
I do like it being a bit more of the players taking the initiative and having agency, as opposed to, okay, we're here, GM. Like, give us our quest giver that tells us what to do.
Right. Instead, it's yeah.
Blech.
I've been looking at the map. I say posting in the Adventure Hooks channel. I've been looking at the map and seeing there's some like Fishman statue, and it says the lost ancient city of Ooh on it. Does anyone else want to go explore the lost ancient city of Ooh? What could be in the lost ancient city of Ooh? Let's get a group together Saturday at 7:30 Central and go find out. Which that people respond to that. They are interested in doing the same thing. You have a group of people who are interested in doing that thing. And then the GM's like, okay, great. Yeah. Cool. I am a big fan of the world building I did for that. I put the Lost Ancient City on the map because I wanted to run a thing there. Cool. Yeah, I'd love to run that.
And now that the people, there are interested players, I'm gonna make a session's worth of content or 2 session or however many I'm going
Right.
to post that I'll be available to run.
Right.
So
Yeah, like if it
how it
is,
looks
for
like things are
example,
shaping up is that each GM will control a base. Base
right.
is just a what would I say here? A symbolic word.
Sure.
It doesn't literally have to be a fortress.
Right.
It's any
It's somewhere safe where
centralized
you're not going
place.
to be, in theory, you're not going to be attacked. You have access to some kind of resources. You can replenish yourselves as characters. You
Yeah.
can heal unmolested. There might, depending on the type of base, be different services offered, like a high
Yeah.
level cleric for
Yeah, it could
resurrections.
be a temple.
Uh, yeah,
It could be a military camp that
right,
will be on the move at some point. And that GM has the authority to run the NPCs in their base, but other GMs don't. You have to
right.
respect that. Now,
Yeah,
again, 2 GMs obviously could communicate with each other and be like,
right,
such and such NPC is going to relocate to my base for a time
right,
because of story reason.
right.
What's the voice? What's the
Yeah.
appearance? What's the motivation?
Or even as complex as like, hey, there's a castle right outside your town ruled by a mad baron, and I have an NPC whose whole thing is that a mad baron killed his whole family. If you weren't running anything else, would you be open to the idea of like this guy comes and tries to assassinate that guy, and now you have a quest giver in your town, or something like that?
Yeah.
That's obviously not baked into the rules. That's just kind of something GMs can, provided it's okay with both parties, decide for themselves.
All right. So, what do I need to do still to get this going? I think I need to make a new Icoros world map, and I've got some ideas of how I want it to look. Some areas are going to look pretty well identical to how
Hmm.
they have all along.
Sure.
Other areas are going to be transformed to one degree or another.
Right. You definitely do
Like, for
need.
example, the northern reaches of Naperna, I want them to not be on the map. I want them to hit the edge of the map, and the map doesn't go that far. Like, no one's explored that far north, and we don't know
So
what's
they
up
can
there.
be mapped out by the game.
I,
That makes sense.
I don't want the entire world to be contained on this map.
Right.
I
Right.
want it to leave some areas unexplored and mysterious.
Yeah, definitely.
I want
And
to.
you
I
need
want to
open
move.
space.
I want to move a little bit some of the continents, just their repositioning. Nothing drastic. They're all going to still have the same relative geographic orientation to one another, and I'm going to be adding in a couple of continents, such
Sure.
as Sarzalam, which would include the fertile splay region.
That's a good name. It sounds very I don't know, is it Fritz Leiber, or it's got that nice like weird fantastical but not in extremely so thing.
Yeah, a little touch of it.
Doesn't sound like a real world word. Can't point to a language that it is based on, obviously.
Here's a
But
question on this related topic. Do you think that in the campaign, whatever document, like the world document, like the details of this nation is this, should I explicitly put this nation is inspired by such and such real world culture or such and such real world history? Because I do that when I'm world building most of the time, more often than not. Not always, but a lot of the time. Like Magnaland, I draw from medieval Slavic and Romanian. 80% of it draws from that
Sure,
that
sure.
kind of inspiration.
implying
Should I
there
put
will
that
be
in the document, like explicitly? if you are a GM running in this nation, if you're a player whose character is from this nation, you're not going to be called, Duncan McBeagle. You're going to have like a Romanian or Slavic type influence. Or some reason why you don't have a Slavic or Romanian. Like, did your family a couple generations back immigrate there, or were like refugees there, or there's some reason. Anything can be done as long as there's some kind of reasoning to it. If there's no reasoning at all and it's just the entire world speaks with British accents, then to me that it kills the immersion.
Right. We're playing in feudal Japan. What do you mean your character's name is Dave Smith, the IT guy who works in the IT department? What's IT?
Yeah. And he speaks with like an American redneck accent.
Right. It couldn't hurt. I wouldn't necessarily go in exhaustive detail with it, but just for the point of informing GMs, just saying like, the ways that, because also not unless you have people who are of these cultures, you're probably not getting truly a fully completely accurate and authentic depiction. So just saying it takes inspiration from makes sense.
Yeah.
So
that was my thought on it.
Just like a little
in Xanathar's
short...
Guide to Everything, at the back of the book, there are these lists of character names, and it literally says what culture they come from.
Yes, it'll say
That's
Slavic.
Very rare that a
it'll
D&D
say
book...
Mongolian. It'll say Niger Congo.
That's so
Niger
rare.
Congo.
Yeah. For a D&D book to actually have that word, like that proper noun of that real world nation or ethnicity or culture, you don't see that very often at all.
Right.
And like I was talking about before with the canon of Ikoros, I do want to distinguish what makes this setting what it is, what characterizes it.
Right.
And that's something that I always, and you have this enthusiasm, probably more than I do, for real world history and cultures and languages, and infusing that to some degree into the fantasy world.
Well, because it really, at least for me, and I'd argue for most people, helps you connect to it when it makes things feel less made up when you have a character's name.
I said this in my last video, my last YouTube video. Fantasy as a genre is already far out there. You've already got magic and elves and things that are fantastical and, like you said, these make-believe things. So when you complement that with things that are like grounded and feel realistic, to some degree realistic, that have like some historical basis, some kind of congruency and consistency with the actual real world human experience, it enhances the game because it gives it that grounding, so you can even contrast what is fantasy. If everything is fantastical, then nothing is magical anymore, because it's all that. It's just everywhere you go, people are, casting spells, and there's fairies and dragons flying around, and that's just normal, and anything can be anything, and nothing means anything.
Yeah, and their names especially are really kind of what help hammer that home, whether it's either place or character names, or even just terms for things like. And there's a fine line too, where Robert E. Howard wrote a lot of really fun, classic, pulpy stuff, but like he has a place in his setting called Iranistan. It's like, okay, I know what that's supposed to be, but that name's kind of dumb. Yeah, like I get it. It just doesn't sound very Persian.
It's like something that was in his like first draft, and he just never got around to developing that more and getting a more not a literal real world name.
Whereas then Fritz Leiber comes up with stuff that sounds made up, but not in a wholly inorganic way. Like you have characters like Fafford, places like Lankmar and the Hlal River, the
Uh-huh.
wizard Shilba, the Eyeless Face. It sounds not real, but it sounds somewhat believable. And then you have people like George R. R. Martin, who it's like, okay, I could see the real world names he kind of smashed together to get
Uh-huh.
a guy named
Eddard instead of
eh,
Edward.
right. And in some cases, actually, I think some of his names even are, whether or not he knew it, actual medieval names, which are just, people in history had names that were similar to
Sure.
our own. Uh, but between
He does his
yeah,
his research. I wouldn't be surprised.
uh, yeah, and like between Adalbert, the Anglo-Saxon, and a modern day Albert, there are a bunch of different variant spellings
Hmm.
and pronunciations and things that are slight variations. But
Okay, so
yeah,
let's
we're yeah,
let's see if we can't recap a bit and then maybe go a step
yeah.
further if
So
you'll
to
if you
to
will.
recap that,
Recap
having
some
a
of the
section,
recap the what defines the Ikoro setting. Okay, so we've
sure,
got it's explicitly a serious setting where people that play this are coming to it to treat this experience seriously.
right, and
Not
they
that you're
are
not going to have any fun. Not that you're
yeah,
not going to have moments of comedy or enjoyment. Yes, but the game itself is treated seriously. Okay,
right.
so that's
And that
one.
there are certain buy-ins which might involve concessions in character building or in your particular way you play them that help that consistency be maintained.
Yes, yeah. Limitations for the sake of consistency, and I think a good example is that was with names. You can't
Right,
be, Dave Super Chad. It's not your character's name.
right,
Now you could maybe play around with that a little bit and get like the mythic version of it.
right,
It probably wouldn't take as much effort as you might think. But you're not here to like make a mockery of this experience,
right,
right? We're coming at this. We're treating it seriously under the belief that there's
right,
something of greater value with this experience than just merely goofing off.
right,
Okay, some sense of historical connection, some sense of connection with real
right.
world cultures.
Even if it's as loose as saying in Romanian and Slavic land, vampires are called strigoi and lords are called voivodes, just to sell the flavor of that.
Yeah, and that that will largely be on me, but of course I'll take
Sure.
suggestions and feedback from the other GMs and players to find those right words. You got to find the
Right.
right word that
Right.
sounds interesting enough, but also sounds good to the ear.
Right.
Like, I talk with Demos, my Greek friend, with some frequency, and I'll consult with him on Greek words. In some Greek
Right.
words, they sound so freaking cool. In other Greek words, they do not sound good to the English speaking ear at all. And I would never use it because it just sounds like Harakila Hara Papaladopoulos. And you're like, what? No, we'll stick with warrior. Okay, so some degree of connection to history and culture, some kind of grounding that will give a good balancing with the more fantastical elements.
Right.
It's not a multiverse. I talked about that already.
Yeah.
I want to make that very explicit. This is
Yeah.
not a
That
multiverse. It does not connect to any other setting. There are not infinite versions of it out there. It's this. This
sure.
is it. Everything's on the line. You're playing for keeps.
Yeah.
It's just
And
that's your
that's
one character.
I
There are
think that's
no
a
there are
fairly
not
easy concession. Yeah.
okay. Um we mentioned another one. What was it? It was let me go back to my notes.
It's about exploration or about contrast between safe areas and wilderness or open map areas.
I think it was in the topic of the character advancement and how to
Okay.
XP work, which that's still an open.
Sure.
That one's still open.
Sure.
But there's going to be something in there about that, which I think is good to
Right.
to find a way that suits the style of the game, which is
Right.
a bit grittier, let's say.
Yeah.
It's
So I
kind
do
of
actually have
it's
a-
kind of a balance of old school
Yeah.
and new school, trying to draw
Sure.
the best of both worlds. Okay. So what are some other? I have some notes, but let's see if you have
Sure.
some ideas. What are some other?
Well,
Because
actually,
that was
I
like
do
5
have,
there.
Yeah,
What are
I
some
do
other
have kind of a
tenets?
spitball on the advancement part, which is that. So I have actually played in a couple of explicitly West Marches games, and I've also played in some games that use a similar framework and are themselves either old school style or OSR style. And in both, there's always the question of what happens if a character dies and you rolling up a new character. Is it going to be a character who's exactly the same level? Why would that be? Or is it going to be a lower level character, and why? And essentially the
Okay.
kind of the distilled point is
Yeah.
that there's really should be some incentive for wanting to generally keep your character alive. You
Yes.
shouldn't feel specifically singled out and punished if your character dies,
Right.
but you should lose something.
Yeah,
It's
there
part
are
of the game
two-
to lose something.
There are 2 potential options for that I'm giving thought to, and I'll be talking to other people about it.
Sure.
So let's say approach A and approach B. Approach A. If your character dies or is otherwise lost permanently, you can make one replacement character that will start at that same level, the minimum XP for that level. So if your level 7 character dies, you can make a replacement character with the baseline for 7th level XP, and there will be some kind of document that says you can have this starting equipment. Spend 500 GP on whatever you want. You can have that
Right.
equipment right out of the gates. So you can only do that if you lose a character. And if you lose that character, you can make one replacement for that character. Right, but it's only that replacement. If you go and you make more characters, they're all going to be first levels. Any
Right.
any new characters is first level. Okay, so that's approach A, which is a pretty, I would say, a pretty kind approach, and a pretty modern approach too. It's kind of sensitive to the players. Okay, then approach B is a little harsher, but still I think fairly sensitive. There are certain thresholds or like checkpoint levels, and if your character dies, you can again make a replacement for that character at that checkpoint level. So they might be like the proficiency bonus levels, like 5, 9, 13, 17.
Right.
I don't even know how high of a level this setting
Sure.
will go to. It may not. I really don't know. I don't really want to get into
Sure.
that level cap stuff right at the moment. So that in that way, it kind of satisfies what you said. Some setback for the character dying. Death should be painful, and it should be.
Right.
I think painful is the right word. Death should be painful, and something that's kind of a bitter pill to swallow. I think that goes along with us taking this seriously.
Right. And actually, so the things that
And
I've
it also, like
yeah.
you said, gives you some incentive to advance your characters.
Right.
I don't like the idea of inadvertently creating an environment in which characters are seen as throwaway, just completely throwaway. I don't want to influence disposability.
Well, so I don't know that these would exactly be things that would just fit one to one, but there are two house rules or meta rules or optional rules that I've specifically seen used that do kind of tie this in and make it part of the game in a way that I personally enjoyed, which is one, the idea of an adventurer's funeral, where a character has died, and so the party can come together and spend a certain amount of money that's usually dependent on the character's level, and then also dependent on the character's level, get for holding a funeral, like having a little role played out ceremony, they get a certain amount of XP for that, which is kind of a way of turning a loss into also a gain, and basically gamifying the mechanics of not treating a character as a throwaway, or showing the value that that character had, or even just getting some extra value out of a character. And then the other one is the idea of like a level floor, where it's in two different games. For whatever reason, it's happened the same way, where the party has been an adventuring company or guild, and they've had a charter, and depending on what they've done, they've eventually at some point completed various adventures. Like in actually, it's a currently running game. We completed the module Palace of the Silver Princess. We completed Castle Amber. We completed some other stuff for some other people. And each time you do that, as part of the rewards, you gain another signatory to your contract.
Yeah.
Which every one of those increases the level of adventure your party attracts.
Right.
So
Right.
new characters come in at level 2 or level 3.
The level floor seems to work well in a game where there's just the one GM, or there's a smaller self-contained player base. It doesn't seem to fit well with what I'm aiming for, which is lots of players and GMs.
I see.
Because then otherwise, there's problems on both ends. There's a problem on the where if you say, okay, well, just that GM's base has that level floor, that then attracts people disproportionately to that GM, which we don't want to do that. Or on the other side, where it's like, okay, no, that increases everyone's level floor of the whole world. It gets contrived, and then the world doesn't have any more first level characters coming in.
Right. That makes sense. Well, then maybe there should be some, because I like that first idea, although you really only get one replacement at the same level, and then it's first level. Seems a little...
I might have phrased that in not the best way. It's meant to be any time you lose a character, you can make a replacement for that character.
Okay.
But okay, I'll use that 7th level character again. So I have the 7th level character, he dies. So I can make a 7th level character that's like my concession for that.
Right.
But then let's say I also have this idea for this other character. He's going to be a first level. I wouldn't get to make any more 7th level characters unless my second 7th level character, he was to die. Then I could make a replacement for him at 7th level.
I see.
Yeah. So it's sort of like character slots, let's say. Like this character slot is a 7th level slot. And if that character dies, I can fill in a character into my 7th level slot.
Well then, there has to be some kind of middle ground, because I would want there to be some way to turn it into part of the game, instead of an arbitrary, I just get this because I had this level character. I like it where there's... I agree that it would be a little weird to work it out to where level floor jumps up for just certain people, certain GMs.
What do you think about the checkpoint idea? That has been communicated to me by Demos and I think one other GM who participate in West Marches style campaigns.
That does
They've
make
spoke
sense.
highly of it.
So it's if you lose a character, you lose a character, now you have a free slot to create a character of whatever the previous checkpoint level was.
Yeah, just like what I explained with the approach A. If you had a 7th level character, you could make your replacement, then it'd be at a fifth level character. But any other new characters you make would start at 1st level. You could only make that higher level one if you lost that 5th level character. Then again, you'd get a replacement of that one.
So you can only make brand new characters at 1st level, and then you can replace higher level characters that way. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that might be a better way to put it. Any brand new character starts at 1st level, but if you lose a character that's above 1st level, then you can make one character that's...
Would there ever be a situation in which you would make a brand new character at higher than 1st level? Would there be a reason for that? Because I know, it could...
I don't think so. I think every single truly brand new character is going to start at 0 XP, and you got to earn everything.
And that would never result in a situation limiting adventures that are available to low level.
Players will be encouraged, or at least explicitly told, the levels of the characters don't have to be the same. Mix and match however you want.
Right. Well, but
You could bring
suppose
a
then...
first level character along in a party where everyone else is level 9 at your own risk.
Okay.
But
Okay. Yeah, that's true.
But
that's true.
isn't that cool? Isn't that just
well
organic and fun and introduces this whole new dynamic? Like, I gotta stay alive somehow. I've run plenty of adventures where there was like a low-level NPC, and they were like trying to keep him alive. You've had that in some of our campaigns too.
Yeah. What I wonder though, that type of thing is best, and I've had the most fun with it in, well, not to harp on old school games, but in BX D&D or things like that, where there are different rates of XP progression for different classes, or otherwise characters just don't level at the same exact speed. So
that's sort of baked in already with the 5-year rules, because your portion of the XP will affect you disproportionately than it will high-level characters.
True. That's true. Because
like if you're first level and you survive, let's say, a hard 9th level encounter,
right?
I mean that XP will probably take you to 3rd level just straight away.
Okay, that's true. Because I was gonna say that that's part of the whole thing is like, yeah, all right, I ended up somehow with a level 1 thief. I don't know how I'm going to survive this. And then you somehow do survive that dungeon. All of a sudden, the same XP that got everyone slightly closer from 5th to 6th level takes you to level just 3, just straight up like that. You just skip right ahead, boom, because you're a thief. So you level at like 1200 and then 2400 and 48.
So let's say you're a first level character and you're adventuring with 3 9th level characters, and you encounter 2 Grick alphas. A Grick alpha is worth
4 or 5?
CR7.
Oh, okay.
They're each worth 2900 XP, so that's 5800 total. 5800 divided by 4 it's practically 1500, right? It's just like a little under 1500.
Yeah, 1250 plus 1450.
1450. 1450. Okay, so yeah, that would get you to 3rd level and like halfway to 4th. That would get you halfway to 4th level.
Okay.
Just from that one encounter.
All right, so then I guess it does.
It's
at least on paper still work that way. Okay.
It's exciting to me. I find that exciting.
Yeah.
I find things that are forced to be everyone's the same, everyone's totally equal, measured out, totally formulaic. I find that just dreadfully boring.
Right.
It's just so forced and contrived.
With character races being a coat of paint instead of having mechanical differences, where now granted that is a way you could play it, but also 5th edition D&D is not really set up that way. And D&D in general is not set up that way. If you're gonna want to have the character
not since 3rd edition.
Yeah.
You got to go to the old school stuff to have those pretty marked differences between races and classes.
Right, but it should, there should be mechanical reasons to reinforce your decision to choose to play like a half orc rather than just, or any of them. There shouldn't be some that are mechanically weaker and you don't want to play. There should be reasons to play everything, and it shouldn't just exclusively be story, because then, I mean, that's not a wrong way, but it's
skins
not incentivizing you. Yeah.
Right. Behind the surface, it's the exact same thing. Your race is just the different skin that you put on. Yeah.
Which is a way that a game could work, but D&D as a system is not really set up for that. That's something that's better in like Fate, or any other game like that, where your abilities are sort of more custom and tied to stuff you choose at character creation rather than set.
So, changing the topic, but also moving on to an idea that I have that I feel very strongly about for one of these tenets, and I need to find the very precise way to word this. And I'm not quite sure exactly my reasoning why behind this. I could maybe flail around and halfway describe it, but I need to give it some more thought and some writing to figure this out. So something that's really crucial to me as a GM is the immersion, the immersive quality of the experience, and the atmosphere and the style of the game. And you've experienced that in our campaigns, and you seem to enjoy that, and the other players seem to enjoy that, and that's, I would say, a pretty major point of distinction for my channel, for my content, let's say.
Right.
That people that watch the Esper videos or buy the Esper books, they know that, and they seem to appreciate or like that these are treated with a sense of immersion and atmosphere and this style, and it kind of evokes this world that you can, in a way, believe in it and become a part of it. And it's an old feeling world. It feels medieval. It feels ancient. It feels like something that's not modern day Earth. It's not modern day people just cosplaying. It doesn't feel like cosplay.
It feels immersive because in some way it feels unfamiliar, and it feels like you are not just in our society. You're in a society that has its own rules, which are different than ours, and maybe not instantly understandable to our minds because it's different, but because of that, they are more immersive because you're like, oh, okay, I know that this works this way in this setting. That's interesting. I wonder why that is.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Now, I cannot expect other GMs to put that emphasis, nor can I expect other GMs to like read through pages of lore and Ikuro setting history and like memorize it or implement it.
Right.
I really can't have those expectations, and I don't really want to be imposing. I want to hopefully sell it to people. I want to hopefully like people end up liking it enough that they get inspired to take that trouble to do that. That's the hope, and I'm certainly going to make that effort, but I'm not going to like try to impose that onto anybody. We just want to make sure there's a kind of baseline understanding. Okay, so
and that's where things like including just a short blurb about historical inspirations might be a part of that in helping people get on somewhat of the same page.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'm flailing around a little bit. I'm getting a little closer to what I'm actually trying to say. I'm not there yet. I'm trying to get there. So something I've noticed with my personal love of the immersive experience is that I really dislike modernisms in the game. And in modernisms can appear in all kinds of different forms. But I'm thinking more at kind of the higher level stuff, like the tenets of the game. So I've noticed that online, many online games, where like professional GMs hire out their services, many of them have these, what do you call them? Warnings? Triggers?
Mm-hmm.
Like
content warnings?
Content warning, sensitivity warnings, or aside from warnings, they'll also have like tags, like this is a LGBT game, or this is there's a word.
I know a lot of people just include stuff like that to say like
inclusive. This is an inclusive game, and this game, and something about that really rubs me the wrong way, and I can't figure out why that is. I'm not sure why that is. It might be because the modern lingo of it hurts my my love of the kind of like old classic world immersiveness.
It,
So
yeah, I don't know.
I want to find a tenant. I want to find a tenant where I can both try to not jump on that bandwagon, because that's a very modern trend. Not jump on modern trends. I want to do something where I avoid jumping onto modern trends, and also avoid incentivizing people that truly are assholes.
Right.
So I don't want that either. I see
Right, 'cause
problems. I see problems on both
Yeah.
end. On the one end, there's a problem where like the game becomes this like modern day activism, and I don't want that. I don't want like politics getting in, like modern real world politics. I don't want it getting political and like modern social agenda stuff. But I also don't want it being like, oh, Esper's against the woke, so we're gonna go and
Right.
be freaking like abusive tyrants. So
Right.
I gotta find the right approach to it. So
figuring out language to communicate that in theory, every game should be LGBTQ, etc. inclusive, because it's an inclusive game and people aren't going to bully people because
there's something
you're
that
not hiring bullies,
have
right. bullies as GMs.
Well, there's something that I've talked about. I can't remember if it was in a video. If it wasn't in a video, then I talked about it with people before a campaign, where I said something like, I'm not one who like follows social trends and like new, terms come out and lingos come out, and that's always changing. I'm not into that. But at the same time, you don't really have to worry about me not being into it, because I already have classic values of, respect for people and, treating people with, with a sense of trust and earning people's trust.
Right.
I place a lot of value in trust. So, okay. Here's what I was vaguely remembering that I talked about in a video. There's something that I've become aware of, and I'm not saying I'm the one who made this awareness happen. Other people have been talking about it, and it echoed something that I had been thinking about but just couldn't articulate. I didn't know exactly what it was for a long time. It's that there's been a trend just kind of in all media for a while now. It's in movies and kind of all over the place, where the traditional values have been kind of mocked and like dismissed, like dethroned. So when you do that, you have to resort to merely things like politics and social trends and stuff that is they're supposed to be subordinate to these higher values of like, artistic endeavors and, that like human struggle of the good and evil within the human heart, and like trying to aim to be trustworthy person who believes in like truth and charity and these timeless qualities. So maybe I can approach it from that point. Like, this game is supposed to have a very classic feeling to it. So we're not gonna follow, you need to put like a checklist before each session of this session is going to get into these sensitive topics. Let's just assume this entire campaign is mature. It's treating everyone as adults. It's gonna get into scary, uncomfortable things. Just assume that that's gonna be there. And along with that, we are going to respect the traditions that we all come from. all of us that are part of this Western civilization, we're going to respect our traditions. We're not going to mock the traditions, and we're going to value the fellowship that develops between people when they act in a manner that gains people's trust and respects people. I'm talking about player to player interactions. The characters could be, dastardly scoundrels and just complete sons of bitches, but the players, meta, out of character, have a level of maturity of respect with one another.
And there are, I mean, with anything like this, it's always the only issue is just figuring out how to effectively communicate it. But maybe something like a rating, like how movies have ratings. If you just say this is definitely not an X-rated, but certainly an R-rated movie.
Yeah.
If you want to participate in this game, be an adult, act like an adult, treat people with respect, make it a safe space for anybody to be who they are. Don't bully them, but also, just be prepared. And if something makes you truly uncomfortable because of some personal experience or something, communicate that.
Sure.
And that. Yeah.
Let me draw a bit of a parallel.
Like that.
I have a weekly men's group that I meet with, and while we do have commonalities, we also have differences. We have differences in temperaments, personalities, religious perspectives, and we will challenge each other, and we'll even debate each other, but we don't do it in the sense of enemies, where you're trying to defeat someone or antagonistically destroy them.
Right.
We do it more in the sense of like sparring partners at an academy, where the point is that you're strengthening each other.
Right.
So that sense, like I said, I can't quite put my finger on it, but I know it when I feel it. That sense is what I hope to instill into the game, and it's going to be imperfect, and there's going to be errors made, but that tenet is going to be there. That at least we're going to have that like guiding star that we're in principle we're following it.
Yeah, and that should, though, I think also come paired with just some also rule, maybe like I don't know. It's certain types of, for example, sexually explicit content are just not allowed, just because this is,
not X-rated.
Yeah, exactly.
Not X-rated. There does need to be an amount of mindfulness or tastefulness, but not but not too much to where it just gets bland and nerfed. Right.
Or like
I want the player. I want the players to be treated as adults. I don't want them to be treated as children.
Right. Or like fantasy racism is okay. It can enhance the story, but if you're blurring the lines between your character and that's a problem. You can't be antagonizing other players for reasons like that.
Yeah. Just hold that thought, because I really do want to talk about that. Oh my gosh. Hold that thought, because I wanted to say something and not lose it, but I'm halfway losing it now. Sparring. Oh my gosh. R-rated. Okay, so the idea is this is not a game that gives you warnings of sensitive content up front so that you can avoid the game or tell people what to censor out of the game. But we are treating this game seriously, and part of treating that seriously is we are going to have an understanding that we're playing this. One of the reasons we're playing this is to confront our fears, is to confront things that do make us uncomfortable, is to confront issues that can be complicated and murky and kind of giving you some internal moral conflict. so that we can learn and strengthen.
Right.
And that really happens. That really works. I think that is both objectively true. I think you can find objective evidence of that. That's what therapy is.
Yeah.
And I've also seen that happen again and again and again and again in my own life and in my own campaigns. If the players out of game have some kind of baseline level of like respect and trust with each other, then in game you can face things
Right.
that maybe touch upon something that makes you uncomfortable, probably connected to some experience you had in the past.
Right.
But by facing that, not running away from it, but facing it in a simulation sounds too high-tech modern, in a fantasy space, an imaginatory, a theater of imagination.
Yeah.
You can take a step closer to getting stronger or getting more courageous in relation to that thing that unfortunately has some kind of power over you.
Yeah, and it's, I mean, different people are different, and will engage with stuff like that in different ways. But it kind of goes back to the same general thing as communicating to your players as a GM, that I'm trying to create challenges for your characters, but I'm not trying to bully you or antagonize you or just kill your characters for no reason. Mm-hmm. It's not an us versus it's not a you versus me game.
Those games are very unpleasant.
Yeah. And the same general thing, I guess, is saying, like, I've written this adventure and I don't know exactly what could emerge. I don't have a comprehensive list of content warnings, but if there's something that ends up hitting on a personal experience and affecting you in an unfortunate way, let me know so we can figure out how to not double down on that, and to to make it so that you, if you experience a little bit of your own personal fear, that it's in a respectful of it way that tries to not hit you in the face with it, but also not avoid it. Mm-hmm. Or that if something has to be avoided because it's just that bad, that we can figure out a way as a group to collectively kind of gloss over that part. Sure. And just
yeah. So you made a comment which I agree with. People are different, right? There's quite a bit of variability, and that's complex. That's very, very complex.
Right.
Since it is so complex, it's difficult to put these one size fits all solutions. You kind of just have to play it out real time with people in an actual dialogue, right? In conversation, in the game. So until you actually get into the interaction with people, it usually is better to err on the side of caution or tastefulness.
Right.
Then once you get to know the people and kind of get a read of the room, a check of the temperature, then you can kind of know maybe how far you can push on things.
Right.
So there's going to have to be something in these tenets and these understandings ahead of time, that on the one hand, we're not jumping on board modernisms and the new lingos that come out, and I don't want to go down that road. I don't even want to touch it. We're just going to stick to the classic route. So just assume this is a mature game, it's an R-rated game, and we're all going to be treated as adults who have to face hard things. On the other hand, GMs, be mindful, err a little bit more on the side of caution until you kind of get to know the people that you're playing with, and you can gauge just through cues, like social cues, how far you can push. There's not going to be a black or white parameter always. It's often hard to put a black or white parameter unless something is just totally extreme.
Right.
I don't want either extreme, like you said, where it goes into like X-rated stuff. And I don't want the other extreme where it's just the whole thing is watered down and safe and approved. That's not Dungeons and Dragons. That is,
I don't think that's as much of a
daycare.
Yeah. I think that's maybe a slightly overplayed problem, and or just things like
in general
these
it is. Yeah, I would say in general that
yeah.
is it is overplayed or kind of blown out of proportion. And in reality, most
Right.
people are kind of baseline respectful and cool.
Right.
Okay, so let's get back to the comment you made about racism, because I think that's a really good example
Right.
of
Right.
you know, violence doesn't seem to bother people so much,
Yeah.
but something like that is, and there's probably reasons for that. Probably because it's more common for somebody to have suffered incidents of prejudice due to
Right.
a arbitrary factor such as, you know, skin color or ethnicity. That's a lot more common of experience than, you know, getting mauled by an owlbear, right?
Right.
So you don't quite have such an immediate emotional connection to it. So I've run, as a GM, I've run a couple games where at some point, at a certain point in the game, a player said, gosh, or even speaking as their character, like their character said this, like, gosh, that's racist, to an NPC, like, gosh, aren't you a racist? And something in me cringed at that. Not because there wasn't some truth to what the player was saying. There was some truth to what the player was saying. I think it was at the modern lingo of it, because no one in that kind of ancient world would say something like that.
I don't know. The idea of racism isn't really a modern one. There's always.
Yeah, I'm not saying that. I'm
Yeah.
saying it was like a modern. It's like a modern insult that somebody would sling at
Sure.
somebody else. That's not something that you would hear someone in an old world saying.
Right.
Now,
well,
I'm not here to police somebody's ability
Right.
to improv their character.
sure.
So, you know, I gotta have some. I'm not trying to like rake anybody over the coals,
right.
but there was something in me that was like, I mean, that NPC has reasons why he has generalized suspicion and loathing for tieflings. Like, tieflings were literally just allied with devils and were responsible for killing thousands of people in the city and trying to conquer the city and subjugate it under the rule of an archdevil.
Right.
And in an ancient style world, or a medieval style world, yeah, people are not going to take kindly to tieflings, and a tiefling's going to have to really have some proving to do to not face that sort of prejudice.
Not to actually get into like race theory and stuff like that, but the thing that always strikes me as an indicator of like modern ideas of race and racism is defining it as things like skin color or such, rather than, you know, in the
Culture,
past,
ethnicity.
yeah, in the past, prejudices, whether they were actual like violent ones or even just the unfortunate but commonplace distrust of foreigners, were a lot more localized, or a lot more based on like individual groups of people. And
sure, or even going farther back in history, my tribe, your tribe.
Yeah, well,
and you can root that in freaking survival.
Right.
You know, there is an innate bias that everyone has for your group, because everyone wants to survive. And even though in the modern day our survival is like surprisingly assured. It's still kind of baked into our psychology
Yeah.
how things were for a vast stretch of human development, where if the other tribe got to that herd of meat first,
Right.
they got to eat and you didn't. And that's a big problem.
Right. I think the real key though in terms of bringing this back to like tenets and rules of a mega campaign is just probably mostly something like uh, avoiding blurring the lines between your character and yourself. Like you can put a lot of
Yeah.
yourself into your character,
Yeah.
but if your character is doing something that's a problem because you have something about yourself that's a problem, that's a problem. Like actually, I I sometimes read RPG horror stories of various sorts just because I don't know,
I have
want
never
to
got
kill
into
time
RPG
or
horror
something.
stories.
They're not all great. Some are
Uh-huh.
kind of.
Okay.
I don't really know that I have any of my own, but the closest thing I have to one is a game where we were playing. It's a system called Patrol, and it's Vietnam War themed, which talking about
There you
uncomfortable
go.
topics
Yeah, yeah.
and things that have to most of us players, it was kind of like it was a way to engage with something that's not really uh, our own individual experience, but is something that other people experienced, and we're putting ourselves in the heads of those people to try and get maybe some better understanding of the complicated politics
Yeah.
and
Powerful
reas-
stories.
and the reasons that brought all this stuff together and how and understand like how why it is that there are some cases now where there are interviews of people who fought each other in that war who are friends now and consider the whole thing on both sides stupid and see it as folly while drinking a beer together. And we
And you
actually to that end,
question how could this have happened? How could people have done this?
right. And to that end, we were playing because we also all generally are fans of the show MASH. We were playing a game where we were a hospital, and my character was a helicopter pilot and various other stuff. And it was focused on the human angle of war and the tragic angle of war. And then there was one guy who hung around the same game shop who just sort of stayed late one time because he heard we were playing that and kind of invited himself in and decided he was going to play like the unit's grenadier, which we don't have a grenadier. We're a hospital unit. We're not an infantry platoon.
Yeah.
And then he just was talking about, oh yeah, I want to, go and fight the enemy. And on that base level, it was just kind of disruptive because he was playing such a tonally clashing character. And then on a further level, he did eventually start throwing some slurs around, and it just kind of got to be the point of like, oh, okay, no, there's sort of something more going on here, and you don't understand what this is about. And so we ended up. It was a short enough game that we didn't end up kicking him from the group because it was only like, I think, planned to be about 5 sessions, and I think he, for some reason or another, ended up missing about half of it anyway. Because
I'm not surprised. I've tended to notice that players that are really problem players are also not the players that are very reliable in terms of like session consistency.
Because I don't know his experience, this player, but for him, it definitely wasn't the game he signed on for, because everybody else was, trying to do stuff to help people, and he was just trying to blow stuff up and just generally play it like it's some other war game where it's completely fantasized and they're not real people involved.
So, yeah, there's like the two sides. And, one side will call the other side bigots, let's say, and then the other side will call the other side, idiots or retards or snowflakes or something. But in reality, both sides are kind of both of those. They're both kind of bigots and they're both kind of snowflakes. They just happen to have like different perspectives on things or different opinions or different methodologies. And I want to avoid both of that. Now, again, this is just hopes and attempts, and none of this is going to work out perfectly. All of this will fall
Yeah.
short of ideals. But I want to do my due diligence to try to set something in place that tries to transcend both of those problems, where things don't end up getting overly sensitive and overly softened, and
Right.
also things don't incentivize those people that take some kind of sadistic glee in wreaking havoc on other people because they have some kind of narcissistic sense that their one way is like the only true and correct way, and everyone else just needs to bow down to their monolith. So it's a tricky line to walk in some ways. I think I'll get it figured out though, and
Yeah.
I'll keep talking. I've Speaking about RPG horror stories, I've had many situations over the years, over the different campaigns I've ran, where one could call them that, but I don't. I don't, because I find that degrading. Basically, if I were to term them as horror stories, basically what I'm saying is I was too immature and too weak to handle that. So I let it just terrify me, and now I'm going to whine about it on the internet. So
Yeah, I don't know.
what I did was
Yeah.
I just talked to the players.
Sure.
We got into some mucky stuff. Usually these situations are two or more players, that they have a clash because they're just such different people. They just
Right.
have very different personalities. They have different political and religious alignments. They just have different perspectives on life and society. And so they have this clash because they're just different types of people. So I talked to them and I put them in conversation with each other. And we had to have that conversation more than once. But if you don't run away from it, and you don't just, dismiss everybody as like these two-dimensional cardboard characters, and you treat them as actual people, and you listen to them and try to see, why is it? And I don't mean that ironically, or I don't mean that as a rhetorical question. Like it's an honest question, genuine question. Why is it that such and such thing was a problem for you?
Right.
Usually, people will tell you, and you'd be surprised how you can get over these differences if you just have some amount of like courage and integrity about it, and just
that exact
talk with
language of why was that thing such a problem for you, that's something I think that could actually fit like in one of those tenets of the campaign you're talking about, because that's a very kind of understanding statement that communicates that if there is a problem, you're willing to fix it, and maybe that kind of does sound more like accommodating somebody rather than forcing all people to accommodate a fictional person who's not quite a real person.
Right. Yeah, that's a really cool point. I guess that door should be left open as part of the campaign, that if you get into friction and muck, you are encouraged to, after the session or the next day or whatever, talk to the people, get into a conversation, get a genuine conversation.
Yeah.
And I'm not having some expectation that just suddenly everyone's going to be these like super warm-hearted, open-minded. People are different. Some people, they're not like that. And some people, the way that they muddle through interpersonal conflict, they are kind of disagreeable.
Right.
so what? Let people go take their method. If you just give it some time and let people have a conversation and like actually be listened to, you can cover a good amount of ground.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There do obviously have to be some hard rules though. Like there have to be things in there that specifically say, you know,
Yes, there do have to be hard
bullying
rules.
people for various reasons is not
Threats
allowed.
of violence against actual people.
Right. Or
That is
taking
that's a hard limit.
yeah, taking in character perceived slights as out of character actual slights shouldn't be done, or other things that are just generally disruptive won't be tolerated. But then within that, just like conflict resolution should be based on a mutual understanding.
Man, I'm so glad we talked about this because I think it just clicked in my mind why it is I've had those cringe moments about those modern lingos and the like warning labels and the bandwagon labels. Is because it shuts down actual communication. It shuts down actual genuine listening and conversation. It says, here's my imposition of my reality, of my perspective. You got to follow this, or otherwise you are wrong, prohibited, not allowed. Shut up.
Right.
Just shut up and sit down and follow my way. Yeah,
Or,
that's what it is. That's what bothers me.
It also could be saying like, here I have my token thing. I'm gonna pretend that I can try to understand people when really I'm not going to, but I just want to seem like I'm appealing to other players. So I'm just gonna put this here and not actually mean it.
So
or other
there's something that I learned recently,
yeah.
and I guess I've kind of always known it, but I truly learned it. It actually sunk in. Let's say. Things that really have value to them, they're not easy and cheap. Things that are easy and cheap are generally not valuable, shallow, just kind of disposable things. And so having a moral quality, a virtue, that's very, very valuable. And so you're not going to be able to come about that through cheap, easy, fast, simple things, such as slapping a label or a sticker on something. It's going to take some kind of risk, like having a conversation with somebody about why you all conflicted at some moment. That's risky. I mean, at the very least, you're risking social discomfort.
Right.
That's not nothing. Like, people are very sensitive to that sort of thing. Like, no one likes being put on the spot or being made to feel uncomfortable socially. Like, why are guys scared to go up and talk to girls? Because the rejection is just so uncomfortable and painful.
There's a whole lot of societal things wrapped up in that, yeah.
So that's a price that you're paying. And that's a risk that you're taking.
Right.
And it takes your time. Your time is valuable. Like, that's your life, and you could be doing something else. Other than talking to somebody has a different perspective on reality about you, and maybe, said things that you found offensive and rude. So I think that's quite a bit of price to pay. But if you can go through with that, then the reward is that you can actually develop a little closer toward a moral quality or strength or a virtue, which is again very valuable.
Right.
So that's who I am. That's what's authentic to me. That's what resonates with my personal integrity. So that's what I have to promote. I can't do this. I can't do this campaign. I can't make these books. I can't do this YouTube channel. All these things that take so much time and effort, and I pour my heart and soul into them. I can't do it unless it's completely authentic and genuine to me.
Right.
And I have to promote things that that are encouraging people,
Right.
not
And exactly,
not
there
telling
are
people to
ways.
just like shut down and shut up.
There are ways to encourage people and to promote the inclusivity of your groups that aren't boilerplate, and that aren't just like a reduced version of claiming that I'm inclusive and not at the same time actually be willing to listen to people and their experiences and being like actually inclusive or actually understanding, which it's always a complicated issue, especially since a lot of these things where I'll see tags like that, those are looking for group posts, and it is, one group looking for people, and it's mostly just, it is in most cases just there because it is to say, we don't tolerate bullying here. Our own group's policy is we don't like people acting like bigots to each other, and that type of thing would disrupt our game.
Yeah. Yes.
And then,
but at the same time,
cases,
how do you know what is bully and how do you know what is bigot, and who gets to decide that, and who gets to enforce that?
Right.
It gets so mucky there. That's why I want to stay away from.
Sure. Which, if that hopefully that works like that, because there's no fun in having to resolve stuff like that instead of playing the game.
Yeah.
But if it's if it's necessary, it's necessary.
Yeah.
But it's not part of the fun of the game. It's not why we're coming together to do this.
Sure.
So there has to be a way to communicate that without just using something that can be kind of a just a generic term that doesn't necessarily actually mean that you can back it up.
Mm-hmm. I really see this potential. I keep thinking about this concept of potential in relation to this not just this campaign specifically, not just the mega campaign specifically, but to this setting that I'm pouring my heart and soul into it. There is I sense a real lack in the role-playing game sphere, especially in the big games, D&D and Pathfinder and the really big ones, where it really is not very encouraging of people facing uncomfortable topics and continuing, like keep facing it. You got to keep going. It doesn't happen fast. It's not, again, valuable things aren't cheap and easy and fast.
Right.
You got to keep facing it together with people and keep going and keep kind of muddling through these conflicts of personalities. But if you can, get through the whole tour of hell, well, then you can transcend to a bit of the heaven.
Right. Well, and that's something where you don't see...
Putting that into the game where I'm not making a game that's like, hey, this game is supposed to serve as also this philosophical platform, but it does leave that door open. It does at least encourage people in that direction for those people who are interested or maybe need that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's,
foremost,
you're not going to...
Foremost is the adventure experience. That's what's foremost.
Right.
At the top of the pyramid, at the top of the hierarchy, that is at the top.
Right.
A great quality adventure experience.
Right. And that's something, I don't know if this is like an appropriate tagline or something, but so the reason why you don't see, or why you do see kind of just blanket avoiding of uncomfortable topics in published stuff is because, it's a good business sense. It makes for a better product where you don't antagonize people and alienate part of your potential base. It's just, for a large scale published thing, it makes sense. Where you do see more kind of reasoned approaches to uncomfortable topics and knowing when and how to confront them appropriately, it's more something you see in individual groups. Like it's something where your product could just not, like, it could not like enforce a stance. It shouldn't just shy away from stuff, but it should kind of, just offer a chance for groups to form like that. And what I was actually getting at is that this game
it
is
leaves that door open.
yeah,
It
and it's
leaves
what
that
it is.
it leaves that possibility there, and it
Yeah,
does also encourage it too. It encourages it, and
right,
it opens up that space
right.
for it,
Well, and then
whether or not
this
people want it or
yeah,
need it. Yeah.
and this mega campaign as like a product, as a thing, as an entity, it's
Entity.
like a
Yeah.
very large scale group. It's not it's to the individual player less like a pre-published experience and more like just a big group,
Mm-hmm.
where you can act more like a group, where you can kind of know people's particular backgrounds and things that they value or that they would find traumatic a bit better than just an audience of complete strangers that you're publishing a book for, and that's it.
That's that's so appealing to me. I get very excited when I think about that. This idea of it's not just the like
Right,
the development of what will become my next book. It's not just that. It's
right,
also something that's alive that so many people
right.
are taking part in. It's very exciting to me. I feel very
It
inspired about
is.
this idea. It could crash and burn just horrendously, but
Well, hopefully
I'm
not.
gonna do my damnedest
Right.
to have this ship actually float and sail and go to, on an odyssey of mythic isles of adventure and the quest for something great.
Well, and I certainly, to the best, most of my abilities, for someone who also has a different day job than this, uh, am here to help, and hopefully there are other people too who all together are willing to help to try and
I
actually
think there
bring that
is.
into
Yeah,
existence.
it seems to be from what I've gauged from talking to people and from the posts that I made on my channel. That seems to be there. Part of my job as a creator, as a creative, like an artist type, is to try to like sense the hungers that are out there that people may not be vocalizing. It can be subtle sometimes, but there's always some kind of hunger or this want or a need. It's kind of like having your finger on the pulse
Right.
of the heartbeat of an area. And I hope I do good at that job of sensing those hungers and providing the nourishment. Yeah, because
Well,
we do need something more than just the mere
yeah.
dumb fun. Now, every once in a while, dumb fun is fine enough.
No, of course.
Has its place, but that's not going to sustain me.
Right.
And if I'm going to be giving this my all and trying to connect it in a meaningful way with other people, then it needs to be something that has sustainability.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think you've done over the years a fairly good job with that.
I would
In
say, all things
2000,
considered, the fact that I've just been kind of bumbling through this over the years, I've done all right. I
better than all right. I mean, in 2010, 11, from my experience, predominant type of uh, published content on YouTube and blogs and stuff around D&D was primarily stuff like GM tips, how to run a game, or how to play D&D, where to find the books, which miniatures are the best, or like, because that was peak late 3.5, lots of splat books, what character builds,
mm-hmm.
stuff like that. And then, in among all that stuff, there's also Ben Evagoji and the star of the changing winds. He's being attacked by giant bats now. This is just like a narrated story or something? What is this? Oh, cool. I can use that in my game. Uh,
Yeah.
that whole thing, that was not something anybody else was doing. That was something that tapped into what at least a particular type of player really wants. And yeah, if this is anything like that, I mean, it should hopefully succeed on that merit alone.
That's the hope. That's the hope, man. Cool. Well, I feel very excited, and I'm very happy that you are, also on board this ship that's, it's not preparing to sail, but the ship's being built. Let's say the first beams are getting molded into the proper forms. So very glad to have you along, and I know that whatever contributions you end up, deciding to do, they're going to be really cool from a player standpoint, from a GM standpoint, from a world building standpoint. You've always got really cool ideas, and
Just don't get mad at me when my GM-based town is a city full of a hive mind, but the consciousness can only inhabit one body at a time. So if they want to talk to a different NPC, the players just have to kind of like search around through the shambling, lifeless meanderers until they find the one guy who it's like his turn with the brain.
What I would say is you can have the brain be sent through
The mail.
tentacles, ethereal tentacles, not physical ones. The brain itself, that is the being. That is the personality. The bodies merely are flesh vehicles. Puppets, if you will. The brain, I see as a trickster. Not that it's an obvious thing. Not that the characters are aware of this. The characters don't. I think it's better if the characters don't know. Like, they're not like, oh, this guy we're talking to is listless. He's not the one who has access to the brain presently. There should be some kind of pattern, like a holding pattern,
Right.
that each of the NPCs
Actually,
go in. So the
that
players
whole thing-
probably will just think like, oh, it's just a simple NPC that he's just
Right.
improving to fill basic function. Oh, that one NPC is in depth and has quite a bit of personality. Then later on, oh, he's back to
Yeah.
being simple like the other ones. That's strange. Meanwhile, this ethereal entity, it may not even be a brain in the sense, a consciousness, let's say, is reaching out and for tricks and deceptive purposes,
Right.
to further its goals. It has some sort of plan, some scheme that it's up to. The players, the characters, right? They could serve as
Right.
tools to further its scheme.
Yeah, that almost sounds like how a town of oblexes or pinctigrexes, pinctigreki, whatever the plural is, would work.
Yeah, Oblex for sure. Also, oh my gosh, Zymocratorus. The epic ooze thing.
Right.
And it collects people. It can like soul cage them as well. The green, man. Gotta try the green. Everyone's doing it. All right, so if anyone plays in a session that's based out of your
Oh.
town. Just gonna have
Doubtful.
to have to
Doubtful.
forget that you heard this little spoiler.
That sounds exhausting to run. There's no way I would do that. I come up with enough NPCs on the fly. There would not be that level of pre-planning. There's always that moment of
It could be the adventure site, like that village.
That's true.
Make it a village. It doesn't have to be so overwhelmingly large of a population.
That's true. And actually, yeah, towns or cities, depending on what they are, they don't need to be the safe space. They could be an adventure locale.
It could be
Could
fantastic
have-
adventure locations.
Yeah. Or in theory, you could even have like a temple in a city is the place you can retreat to for safety, and the city itself is being torn apart by a gang war between different factions, and that's the adventure locale.
Nice. Yeah. Bazagon City could easily function
Right.
that way. Bazagon City is as much dungeon as it is city.
Right. And you know, on a certain level, a city is a mega dungeon, and a mega dungeon is a city, and you know, all of those things are you can play around with how exactly you express them. Any large scale place with different parts and different sub-regions with different factions that you can explore in different fashions, like approach from different angles or go through different loops.
Very much so. Yeah, many dungeons are like their own little self-contained town or ecosystem, and cities can very much be seen as a dungeon, or like I said, if they're big enough, like a mega dungeon. Well, we covered a lot of ground. This was very helpful.
Yep.
I had a couple, I think, breakthrough moments. That was very helpful for me. I'm going to make a couple notes post conversation here, just to try to see if I can get those concepts to stick well with me, so that I can better explain them and talk about them going forward. So, thank you very much.
No problem.
All right, and thanks everyone who watched or caught this later on. You know, this idea is something that I wish was ready to just pull the trigger on tomorrow, but I'm gonna try to do this right.
Yeah, you got a book to finish first.
I got a book to finish as well, and I'm really trying to get that finished, like really, as in soon. I want to be able to get to the print company in the near future. So it's taking shape bit by bit, and you know, I'm gonna try to get these pieces set in place as best I can to give us the best shot of something that, who knows? Let's see how great of a campaign we can make it. I think the potential is vast. All right, we'll wrap things up there.
Yep.
Thanks again, Adam. I'll talk to you.
Of course.
All right, everyone. Till next time. May your adventures be many.